Okay, welcome everyone to the Beyond Dentistry podcast. I'm Dr. Dan Greenberg, and I'm here with Dr. Mark Burhenne, who is also known as Askthedentist. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dan. Glad to be here.
Of course. So you're calling in from California, is that right?
Napa Valley, it's kind of rainy outside. It's one of those sleepy days here. We've got these atmospheric rivers coming through, which we are not complaining about. We need the water.
Yeah, and over here in New York, we haven't seen snow in like months, and it's supposed to get. So that's that.
Crazy.
So to kind of explain to everyone who hasn't listened to this podcast before, the goal of this podcast is to show all potential pre-dental dental students and even practicing dentists what other options there are and pathways there are within the dental profession. It's really exciting to see what everyone's doing. And Mark over here has started Askthedentist. It's been like that, been Askthedentist since 2010. He started with his daughter, did a little research. So we'll hop right into it. So tell me a little bit about your background and kind of how you managed to get to where you are today with this.
Well, a lot of hard work is the short answer. I started off as a pre-dental student. I was up at University of British Columbia. I'm not Canadian. I was from the Bay Area originally, but I ended up there, enjoyed that. My dad was a physician. I knew I didn't want to do that. Which was great. At least I had a focus, and I loved healthcare. I definitely was that kind of person that loves to work with their hands. I'm definitely a little bit of a detective. I love triage and diagnosing and getting to the root cause of issues. So it kind of, once I figured it out in college that this was for me, I applied to dental school. I got into my first choice, thank goodness. That was in the Bay Area, University of the Pacific. Now it's called these dental school, Dugoni Dental School, great dental school, great education. And I came out as a safe beginner, as they used to call us, with that DDS degree. And I really was not well prepared other than in clinical expertise. I felt very prepared there. I did a 1-year kind of stint at a big clinic in the Bay Area. That was a great education for me. And that's kind of where I, along with some other early influences in early life, that's where I kind of thought to myself, this is not how I want to practice dentistry. I don't want to work in a large clinic. Patients are not insurance account numbers. They are people, and they need a lot of attention and more than just dental work. And each patient was different. So from that point on, for 35 years, I set up my own practice, started from scratch. Back in those days, it was risky, probably riskier today, perhaps. But I did look at practices to purchase. I didn't like what I was seeing. I was, you're buying into someone's sweat equity, but I didn't like the style of practice, hence maybe the attitude of the patients and the staff. So finally, after a year of looking, I decided to set up from scratch, lease some equipment, and started exactly how I wanted to practice. And did that in the Silicon Valley, which was a great place to start. Everyone had insurance. Not that I'm a big fan of insurance, but there are some good aspects to it. And from that point on, it was kind of a rocky ride because, I was not a businessman. So I figured that out. Loved the clinical aspect of it. Loved the contact and being able to help people. That kind of human interaction was really, I know it sounds trite, and I did not put that on my getting into dental school essay, but you know what? It's true. That is probably the most rewarding part of, having them call you a week later or come in a week later and say, oh my God, I'm so much better. I feel better. Can I refer you some patients? That kind of thing. So I did that for a while. And then I realized that insurance really was determining indirectly, mostly indirectly, my treatment plans. And I didn't like that, didn't fit in with my philosophy. So I dropped insurance. I would do the insurance paperwork. Our office did that, but we would always get paid up front. We dropped Delta. That's the largest dental provider in the US, a dental insurance company. They basically fix prices. They tell you every year a dentist has to reapply and ask for a raise. And it was just, and when I say they indirectly control your treatment plan or influence your treatment plan. What I mean by that is that they pay for certain things, and there are a lot of things that they don't pay for. And I think what happens is the dentist gets into the rut so that they can pay the bills and keep the overhead, paid off. They kind of gravitate towards the procedures that are paid for by insurance because they know it's much easier to collect on that. So, but I didn't go that route. I dropped Delta. A lot of my colleagues and staff and some family members, they said, "That's crazy, Mark, don't do it." And you know what? It worked out fine. You have to change your style of practice. So, and then came my second career, and that was, as you said, 2000. I think it was a little bit later, but I had a website early on called virtual-dentist.com. And that was just copying HTML code, dropping in my text. That was, I think, in the early 90s. And you're too young to remember this, but you would actually win awards like top 5% of the web. Yeah. And this is Netscape and pre-Netscape.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's around the time of Netscape, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was very early on, and I just wanted to get the message out. And then to shorten the story, I had 3 daughters, and my oldest daughter essentially was listening and hearing my message while working summers at the practice, or when I was on a phone call with a patient after hours. And after having worked at Google, Facebook, and Twitter, she said, "Dad, we got to get you online." And that's how Ask the Dentist came about. And it's all about educating the public with this notion of functional dentistry, which is what I had been practicing. Convincing other dentists is one of the most difficult things to do. So I did what the pharmaceutical companies did back in the, late 90s. They went direct to the public which didn't turn out very well, but because they couldn't build swimming pools anymore for physicians, they went direct to the public, told the public of what's out there. This will help you. Don't read the fine print below, right? Of course. And so my daughter and I have educated millions of people on what they should be looking for when they go see their dentist. And that's the basis of Ask the Dentist. And I came up with that name even before I knew what the real impetus was. It was just initially just to get interesting information out there on dentistry that you don't learn in dental school. So
yeah, so it's
long trip.
So it's funny that you bring up pharmaceuticals, because every time I watch TV, I'm like, all right, so you as a consumer with pharmaceuticals, you're making a decision about your health, and you can actually be informed. And when you speak to your doctor, it's not like the first time you're hearing about it, right? You're kind of going in with previous knowledge, and maybe even looked it up. Even someone came in today to an appointment, and they said they showed it. We do a lot of at our hospital. We do a lot of oncology, so mandible resections, things like that. And then ultimately, those patients need to be restored with dentures. So a patient comes in, they're like,
right.
"What's I think it was a Stabident," and it was like a stabilized lower denture. And I was like, I have no idea. In my head, I was like, no idea. So I quickly left the room. I researched it a little, and then it's funny how patients will come to you with previous knowledge, or they'll do research, and same thing with pharmaceuticals. So I find that interesting, and I have to ask you this. So you said Ask the Dentist kind of came about. Is it like a play on Ask Jeeves, or is it something unrelated at all, or is this the first time you're hearing it?
That's the first time I'm hearing that, but maybe subconsciously. That's very, very well said. I do know of Ask Jeeves. I never really used it, but I mean, it probably was subconscious, because back then everything was ask the blank,
yeah.
Right?
The easiest thing.
So,
right. It's
right.
It's like going on Google and searching best dentist, and someone actually named their practice the Best Dentist, right? And they do that in pizza places all the time in New York. It's like the best pizza in New York, and there's a place called the Best Pizza in New York.
Right. Yeah, that was before SEO. I had no idea what SEO was. I do now, but that's the first time I've heard that. I'll have to mention that to my daughter.
You have to.
She'll get a kick out of it. And you know what? She's young enough where, she's probably heard of Ask Jeeves, but yeah, that it's possible. But that somehow popped in my head. I didn't register it for a long time Back then, registering a domain was not really a big deal. And then, things started taking off, and my daughter said, we got to register this right away. So, and then we got a lot of offers. People wanted to buy it from us, and we said, let's hang on to it, see what it develops into.
That's great. Yeah. So you're taking all of my questions, but let's go to domain. So let's track back actually just for a minute. For everyone who doesn't know, Ask Jeeves was basically like a search engine back in the day. It was like basically pre-Google, or not pre-Google, but like basically at the same time that Google was becoming big. And then SEO is search engine optimization. I honestly just came about that a couple of years ago because I had friends that kind of worked in that space, and you don't realize like how important it is. Just and if you run a dental practice, that's like all they talk about. It's like, how are you going to be at the top of the Google page, right? That's like really like good real estate to own when someone searches for a specific keyword, right?
Right. I mean, it's essentially the yellow pages of my time, and it's a lot more specific, and they can target certain people that are interested in that information. I mean, it's really quite an amazing thing, but there is a dark side to SEO as well. So
tell us the dark side.
Well, I mean, so I know of some health influencers that have a very strong message that is controversial. I'm very cautious about my message on fluoride. I always back it up with research. And Google, being as big as they are, owning that whole market or the majority of it, now with ChatGPT and latest developments, maybe that's going to change. But they did this. We were getting over a million hits a month for a short time. And then the SEO, the indexing of Google, the software, the algorithm that Google was using to read pages and to index them and to rank them on a search. Let's say you search for wisdom teeth surgery pain. That would bring up certain sites. But then the SEO, and I think this was about 5, 6, 7 years ago, Google basically went to an algorithm that emphasized a larger corporation or a larger company's website. And so that's the dark side. The dark side is there's some filtering going on, there's some bias there, and it's usually towards a paying customer. So when Google says everything is free and an open platform, that's definitely not true. And I think back to what you said earlier, dentists need to learn about SEO. That is internal marketing, of course, is the best. Treat your patients right. Ask them for referrals. But you do need to know about SEO, or someone in your office does. And I think it's better to have some knowledge of it personally and have someone in the office that has knowledge of it, because the minute you go out of office, with a contractor, they're going to take advantage of you. Typically, these companies do a very light job for a lot of money, and it's better that you understand what SEO is,
right? And what your goals are within it.
Right. Exactly.
So,
I mean, you can literally attract certain types of patients. If you're a functional dentist, I would say, make sure that you own that market, that SEO category in your market, whether it's a small town or a big city. So definitely.
For sure. So with Ask the Dentist, your goal with that is to educate the population. So I know that comes from your previous experience with, just being in your practice and wanting to do the correct treatment for the patients. Who makes up your team to be able to provide all that information to the patients? And how is that backed? And I know you mentioned research as one of them. Is it research and personal experience? Is it journal articles through like JADA?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's a multifactorial approach. It's just me and my daughter. We wrote all that stuff together. We wrote a book together on sleep medicine, sleep dental medicine. We've done all of that. And obviously, we would like to go to the research first, and we do, and we cite studies, and you'll see that on all our blog posts. Instagram, I think, is a little bit more difficult. Instagram is wonderful. It's great to connect with people. I get a real feel of what they want, what they're asking, but it's such a short interaction that it's very light. You're not able to give them the full. I mean, you can get them going in the right direction, and certainly lead them back to the website, but Uh, a lot of it is based on clinical knowledge, and what I noticed in my 35 plus years of practicing is that, I would practice based on what my curriculum was, and stay in the safe lanes, but then occasionally there would be an unusual case, and I would do a little research, and I would realize, oh my God, there's some more answers out there that I never was exposed to. Then you read about in most research, whether it's computer research or medical research, that there's a lot of cutting edge stuff out there, and it may be pre-study, or it may actually be a study, but it takes 10, 15 years for that to filter down to an education. So that's what I was referring to earlier, I think, before we hit the record button. The best and most interesting part of your education comes after dental school.
Right.
And that's really up to the practitioner. You've got to look at it. And that's the great thing about Google. That's one of the great things about the democratized, information that we can get on the web, although there's a dark side to that as well. So you just have to really be able to filter through that. You have to learn how to read studies and then apply them. And basically what you're doing is you're matching your clinical expertise, which is beyond what you learned in school, hopefully, right? Best case scenario. And you have to compare it to the data that you're reading about currently, and you have to match those two and integrate them so that it makes you a better practitioner.
Yeah. And I've realized this firsthand, once you start going down the rabbit hole, there's never an end.
Yeah.
Because there's so much information out there, and then you have to then be your own detective and know what information to believe, what to not believe. Because I used to do a little research when I went to Stony Brook, and one of my mentors over there, he always said, he's like, you can read a lot of research, but trust me, they're only publishing the good results, right? Like if they were bad results, most of the time you're not seeing them, right?
Well, especially if it's funded by a company or a dental school sometimes. I mean, it depends on who's funding the company, the study. If they don't, and this is all in the contract, and a good study has a contract where no matter what the results are, we're going to publish. But that's not always the case. So sometimes the results are not what the person who funded the study wants, and the people who did the study still get paid, but the study never gets published. Exactly. They pull the plug. So, no, I mean, rabbit hole, you're right. I love that kind of thing. I do probably about an hour or two of research, 4 or 5 days a week, because to me, it's enjoyable. It's kind of like, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan, but the first thing that pops in my mind is Scotty, the engineer. And then Captain Kirk will say, you need some free time. We had a tough day. Go off and relax, have a drink, and he says, no, I'm going to go study my engineering journals. I mean, yeah, that's kind of what I like to do. But what I'll do is, we've had on staff some PhD researchers that help us with the studies. Again, as a dentist, we're not taught how to do research and read these studies, and sometimes not even understand them correctly in terms of the efficacy or the reliability of the study. Like what's double blind, what's triple blind, all of those things. And that you can get training in, or you can learn on your own. But it's important to be able to read a study, and if not, go get some help. And then often, what I'll do is I'll reach out to the people that did the study and have a discussion with them. And you know what? Most of the time, they're happy to get on email and then chat with you. I've done some Zoom calls, so that is, I think, important. And I'm all for trying to connect researchers with clinicians. I'm doing that with the Forsyth organization that's associated with Harvard. Right. They're one of the early founders and original researchers in oral microbiome studies. And I'm talking about like the 20s. I mean, and most dentists don't know about them. So it's important that you hook up with a researcher if you want to become a very high-end, forward-thinking clinician. You have to be kind of a semi-expert or an amateur in that, and to fill in the rest, you have to have good people that you talk to.
So on the realm of your microbiome, I told you this before, I was looking through your website, and one of the biggest things that stood out to me is you've been hounding these dental schools to like put things about microbiome, dental sleep medicine, and healing cavities into their curriculum. But it's the same thing with
Right.
like oral surgery equipment. Like it hasn't evolved. It's been the same way for so many years, right?
Is that you?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, good. Sorry. No, I thought it was me. I'm glad it was you.
So it's
Yeah.
it's
No,
been that for
I've approached my
I'm
dental
so
school.
afraid to switch it because whatever is not broken, don't fix, right?
Right. Right. Well, to give some leniency to my dental school and other dental schools, the curriculum is packed. It's full. I mean, it's like a laptop. Everything's crammed in there. There's no room for another RAM chip or a fan or anything. A bigger motherboard. That's just the nature of it, and it's you would have to remove something to put something in, and obviously there's a prioritization there. You want a dental student to be a good clinician. You want them to be able to remove a tooth safely. You want them to recognize gum disease properly, and that takes a lot of time. So I understand that. That's why I love GPRs. I think that should be mandatory. In some states, I think it is, right?
And
But in my day, it wasn't. It was one of those things. It's like, what's a GPR? Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, I've been in dental school long enough, right? So, but that's okay. I mean, I've got a network of dentists that are on our directory. They're functionally minded. Some of them need, coaching and new information in the functional realm, like sleep medicine, sleep dental medicine, oral microbiome coaching. We've done some CE for them. I mean, again, the education comes after dental school. That's the part that's going to enrich your practice and make every day interesting is the stuff you learn after dental school. Dental school is like a driving test. It just makes you safe. You're not going to kill anyone out there. You're not going to make a wrong turn. You're going to use your blinker. But really, the interesting part comes when you've driven for 10, 15, 20 years and you're really good at it and you enjoy it. Or maybe you go out on the racetrack and, push the limits a little bit.
Exactly. So for those who kind of are interested in, I want to kind of track back to SEO and then the domain, because I think what you did back then, it's like almost like investing in Facebook in like 1995, like in terms of like getting a domain.
Right.
Like now, I mean, we have a domain for the pre-dental consultants. The only difference is that our name is a lot less unique than your name, right? Your name is more general,
Right.
which is a better thing to have in the domain world. Like you want,
Right.
to have the domain for Drake, because then he might buy it from you in the future, which you were kind of referencing, earlier. So, you hit on this a little, but how did you go about getting that domain back then? And then what's the process of keeping that domain throughout these years? And what's your plans ultimately with that?
Great question. The answer is, I don't know. I mean, my daughter helped me with that. Yeah. I mean, there was I know some of it. There was a domain. I mean, I think the information that I give you is going to be so out of date. Now it's all automated. Of course, I think it renews every year or two. I think, I could be wrong on that. I think once you own it, that's it. You can buy it for life. And we actually almost lost it once. Someone tried to take it away. Then there was a Askthedentist in Australia on Facebook. Facebook shut them down. I mean, we have a lot of imitators, which is, of course, very flattering, but you have to really hang on to that domain. It's changed a lot. I think it's easier now. But in the early days, it was a constant 1-year renewal. If you missed the letter, again, it wasn't an email. If you missed the letter, it gets tossed out, looks like junk mail. I mean, and you haven't re-registered it, you could lose it. So that domain has value, obviously. And back then, we didn't realize how much value it has. And again, we've been around for, such a long time. I mean, that in itself is that recognizability or that recognition factor is very important. So there's no going viral and being an overnight sensation on the web. I don't see that, especially when it comes to oral health. Oral health just isn't exciting enough. Now, if it's some gizmo or some TikTok video or something, fine. I can see that, but it doesn't have legs. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It was a second career while I would come home after a long day and get online and write some stuff and confer with Catherine, and we would do that on weekends. And that was a lot of work. So, but now I spend more time on it because I'm retired from clinical practice, and so it's really a nice thing to retire into or to transition into. It's my second gig, probably my third gig, but I enjoy it. I don't necessarily do it for the money, or it's certainly not for the notoriety, but it really is very gratifying. Just the interaction I get and the thank yous and just turning people's lives around. And that's just on Instagram, which again, as I said, such a light, very digested way of interacting with people. But I'm getting better at it.
Good. And so if I were to go on your website, how would that look for a consumer or someone who's just visiting your page?
Right. Well, I hope it looks this way to you, but it's very friendly, approachable. My picture's there, my name's there. There's a background section on my daughter and I, why we're doing it. There's a store. There's there are hundreds, maybe even, I think over 1,000 articles. Like, for example, not that boilerplate, like what is wisdom tooth surgery? We get into that a little bit, but it's a very friendly, non-shaming tone on what to do. Do you need them out? What to look for in a dentist? And then once you have the wisdom teeth out, our longest section is on how to recover from it. What things that you should do that maybe you weren't told in the post-op section of that treatment. So very practical, easily digestible advice, and a very kind of like, I'm the professional, you're the end user, I know more than you do. It's none of that. It's just advice that really is actionable, easy to follow, and yeah, and you could say, oh, buy a wedge-shaped pillow after the surgery. It's more like, buy this pillow. Here's the link. It'll be delivered to your house the next day. Have it there before you go in. Keep your head elevated. This is why you should keep your head elevated for 2-3 days after surgery. Stuff like that. And people love that. They eat that up. They share it with their friends. And that's just an example. So, and then of course we get into stuff that they haven't heard at their dentist, like that fluoride varnish may not be the best thing for your kid. A night guard, maybe you shouldn't get that night guard. First, find out what the root cause is of all that jaw pain or TMD issues, and make sure it's not related to sleep disorder breathing. I mean, so there's a lot of new information there that, no offense to dentists, but we all get into our ruts. And again, there's that disconnect between cutting edge information and what we learned in school or what we've been practicing for a long time. And again, I work with dentists on fixing that, but the easiest way to do that and to improve that flow of information, and i.e. getting a better result for the patient, is to instruct and to educate the patient, because they gobble it up. They love it. It's like, oh my God, that makes sense. Okay. I don't want to have it be made worse by the night guard. I want to address the root cause because it's going to save me money. It's going to save me time. They get it right away. It's logical, right?
Yeah. And it almost gives them the right questions to ask, right?
Definitely. And we do that too.
And so you're mentioning something about a store. Can you kind of explain what you mean by that? And then also, difficult question, but you were mentioning that this is like your second or third side gig, and you're retiring into it. So can you explain kind of like the income producing aspect of what you're doing?
Right. Okay. So 3 questions there. You may have to remind me.
Yeah.
So as I go along. But the first one was what? It was
the first one was about how.
Oh, the store.
Yes.
The store. Yeah. So the store kind of came out of people incessantly just asking us questions like, which product, what, because they want the best. And we've conditioned them to giving them a very polished, very informative, counterintuitive, counter dental culture answer. And so they want to go all the way to the end. They want the exact product. So I'm very cautious about that. I get approached all the time, probably easily 10, 15 times a week by manufacturers, sometimes more, on, you should recommend our product. We'll give you a little money to do so, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, I look at the ingredient list right away and it says, I can't because of that, this, and that. So we've curated a list. It's a
Mm-hmm.
store. You can go to it. It has a little explanation of why I'm recommending the product. You can click on it. Usually it's Amazon, but not always. It goes directly to an affiliate. We do get a little on that, sometimes 5 to 10%. It's not why we do it, but it just has made our lives much easier. And that list keeps changing. We just pruned it. We just pruned the list and added some things to it. And that list changes a lot. And so that's
It's like Dr.
obviously
B approved products.
exactly. Or products that I
Right.
use at home, products that I would recommend. It's based on age and sometimes gender and practicality and it's there's some things on the list you'll think, how is that related to dentistry? But it is. So like water filters, right? I'm very particular about water filters. I've been filtering water since before my oldest was born, Catherine, before then. But I was very concerned before my first daughter was born that she was going to ingest
Mm-hmm.
fluoride. So I did a lot of research and we had a water filter on board. So I'm very particular about water filters. There was one recommendation we made that was very inexpensive, just a countertop. Amazon, next day, you get something that can filter your tap water. Fluoride, 99.5% of it, which is pretty good. But the byproduct of the filtration was microplastics in the water. So again, I look for third-party testing and all that. We changed that recommendation. The recommendation now on the list is kosher. It's wonderful. So the store is very important. And obviously that's, to answer your third question, I think that's partly how we monetize our work and the website. What was the second question?
The second led into the third. It was just about your second and third gig and how you're transitioning.
Right. So obviously, I think most people would think that my first gig was dentistry, and it probably is. And then, of course, that morphed into and transitioned. There was a big overlay there for a decade into being a blogger. I mean, I went from being very active and running between chairs and standing up and sitting down and to sitting at a desk. And now I understand how dangerous that is for you. A lot of my patients were engineers at Google and Apple. They had their cubicles. They did this all day, with their hands and keyboards, and their eyes were strained. They were wearing glasses. So I'm kind of in that boat right now. I have a stand-up office and I have a sit-down office, and I try and work out in between. But so that's really the first and second gig. I would say my first gig was, and I wasn't really paid well for it, but if at all. But my first gig was healthcare. It was a hobby. It was nutrition. It was food science. It was reading books on longevity and how to save the planet with responsible regenerative farming. This was back when I was 16, 17 years old. Friedhof Capra's book, The Turning Point, Life Extension by, again, you won't remember any of these, but that was Dirk Pearson, Sandy Shaw, I think, wrote that book. Vitamins, learning which vitamins to take and which supplements, which foods. Yes, I got hooked up with, misled by the whole saturated fat thing being bad for you. But I worked out of that in my system very quickly. Good book on that is The Big Fat Surprise by Ty Colts. I recommend everyone read that. But so that really was my first gig. And of course, that kind of gives you an idea of, okay, I got into healthcare, into dentistry. That was a very conventional, very set in its way type of curriculum, which is fine. It's needed. And then you can see how that first gig influenced that transition into the third gig, right? Reading studies, reading about it, researching it. I recommend supplements to my patients. Well, very few dentists do that. And I go pretty wide on it. So, and of course that's all on the website. I've done a master class for Dr. Mark Hyman. That was a 4-hour thing. I didn't realize it was going to be that long. The whole last section is supplements for gum health and overall bone density and remineralization of the teeth. And so again, that's the functional approach. And I think that first gig, the reason I brought that up, it's that first gig that kind of brought me to the last gig, probably the last gig.
So what you did is you basically morphed your hobbies with your work, which
well said. Definitely.
They always tell you this: if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And like that kind of brings you back to the Star Trek analogy, right? It's like, this is not work for you. Right. For a lot of people, doing
very good
research and studies and like figuring out like things in terms of like website building, like that's a job. Like they don't like to do it.
Right.
For you, that's just what you do, and that's what you like to do. That's like
Right.
that's
Yeah.
how you like to spend your free time.
Right. Yeah. In dental school, I had the reputation. I was called Mr. Consumer Reports and Dr. Inconvenient Truth. And because as we're sitting there in, first session of operatory working in our typodonts, putting in an alloy, I said, "Where's the suction? I'm breathing in mercury vapor." And, all my, buddies on either side of the bench were like, "What are you talking about?" So anyway, I mean, yeah.
That's great. So tell me how it's working with your daughter, because I come
Hmm.
from, my brother's an optometrist, my dad's an optometrist, they work together, right? And so they have a
Right.
interesting relationship in and outside of the office. But tell me how it is, how you facilitated that relationship and when you approached her to now. It's been over 10 years.
Well, I mean, I didn't facilitate anything other than I tried to be a good dad. I think she was facilitating and kind of
Yeah.
grooming me. I think it was the other way around. She literally left halfway through college to do a full year at Google, not as a subcontractor, and then she went back and finished college. So very unusual young woman. Very very took very. She actually wanted to be. She was thinking about pre
Hmm.
med, and I think her mom and I basically said that's a rough road for a young lady. But anyway, I mean, she found her calling. It's marketing, it's SEO. She has her own corporation, of course, but this is her baby. This is something that she created, pulled out of a hat and said, "Dad, I know your message is different. It needs to get to more people." I had no idea what she was talking about at that time. I said, "Oh, that's wonderful. And what do you think that message really is?" We would talk about it. And then she basically said, "This is how you get it out there." And so it started slowly. It wasn't just this one big, massive website with a podcast and plans for a book. Of course, it never starts that way. But once you get online and you start talking about this with a name and an identity, a URL, then you realize you need more
Right.
stuff. And there's some gaps and holes to fill. And of course she had the knowledge and the expertise to do all of that. I just provided the content.
Hmm.
And working with her is a lot of fun. I mean, and there are times when sometimes I'd rather just sit and chat with her about the grandkids or skiing or something like that. But because there's a lot of work and a lot of, we have biweekly meetings, and then we've got a meeting for another company that we started together. It's oral health related, and it takes up a lot of our time. But she's passionate about it. She doesn't have a dental background, and as long as she's passionate about it, I'm there at her disposal because I love the message. I like what it's doing for dentistry. I mean, I think it's going to help save dentistry and help a lot of patients. So it's kind of this mutual admiration for the message, and then her unique skills and my unique skills, being my daughter, I'm being her dad. I mean, it's funny because I mean, they say the roles reverse, right? I think that's happened much sooner in our relationship than it has in most parent-child relationships, because she's amazing what she does. I mean, she's kind of acts like the CEO, and she gets the job done. So it's a lot of work. I don't want to make it seem like it's always easy, but we rarely disagree on things. I try and keep things very
Hmm.
professional. I have a certain style of presenting things to patients and hence viewers and listeners. And I think patients and viewers and listeners now, they expect a certain degree of professionalism and efficacy in the message. And Catherine comes from, I mean, like TikTok. We've dabbled with TikTok. I think the first time we hit TikTok, our first post was within days, 1.6 million
Crazy.
hits. I mean, and it's because there's not a lot of good information on TikTok. But I'm not a TikTok kind of guy, and I don't want to cheapen the message. But on the other hand, it gets the message to a lot of people. She proved me wrong on that. So I would say there's a generational clash at times, but we always work it out because we know what the prime mission is, the prime directive. Again, Star Trek analogy there, the prime directive, and we're very clear on it. And we always fall back on that. And that's what's helped us, the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And it's good to be in the position that you are in, because you have someone who's in the industry that understands,
Yes.
what you need to do. And then you have you that has like that clinical background. And like you said before, like you have this standard that you've kind of established within your website, within the company, that when you put information forward, this isn't like half-ass. I did research on one article, that was not backed by anything. This is like you've done your full-fledged research on whatever that may be, and your viewers understand like this is your baseline, right?
Right.
Which
right.
is good. So
Trust is everything when you're giving out healthcare information, and I do everything to prevent that trust from eroding. It's so important. Otherwise, we're not effective as healthcare influencers or practitioners, for that matter.
in terms of metrics and like tracking, I guess, people who come to your site, or even just you could track anything these days, but
You can. It's amazing.
what have you seen through your website, or even like through returning clientele, people like that?
Right. So you're right. I'm not the expert in that. Catherine has her Google Analytics page. I think I got that right. You're nodding, so you must know about that. I'll ask her sometimes, not very often, because I'm not in it for the numbers. But I'll ask, how are we doing? And how did that last post do? Did it resonate? But she's watching that very carefully, of course. For example, I mean, if I do a video, it's important to me that it is accepted. In other words, that it's popular. Typically, I mean, typically, we have meetings weekly, and as I discussed, and the last numbers that I heard, which were shocking to me, is that anytime I post something on Instagram, that day we've reached out to 1.6 to 1.9 billion people. It's called not engagement. I forget what they call it in Instagram. It's a reach. It could be reach, but I thought it was something else. But I mean, so that doesn't make me nervous. It doesn't necessarily please me, but it makes me realize that my job is very, very important, that I get it right. Because I mean, the reach is so great. And again, I mean, if sometimes I'll look at the numbers of other influencers, and we're right up there with some of the big ones. We're certainly big in oral healthcare. Sometimes we're the biggest in certain areas. And again, that's not important. But then you look at like, a Kardashian site. Maybe that's too an extreme of an example. But I mean, they'll post and they'll get like 200,000 likes in a matter of minutes. So that's a whole different category. And I'm sorry, I mean, oral health
because we're very
well. It's just oral health is just not that sexy. It's sexy, but it's just not that sexy, and that's okay. And we're working on trying to make it sexy.
Yeah, I mean, once it becomes cool again so I guess over like the last 10 or 15 years, like there's been this paradigm shift of working out and like being healthy. And like, I just know from my parents, like 30, 40 years ago, that just wasn't the case. Like you can confidently walk on a beach with like a dad bod, a big belly, and no one cares. Yep. And now today it's like, you can't do that. Like you have to focus on your health. So, there's just,
which is wonderful.
So there's been this paradigm shift over like the last, few years, where now people are focusing on that. So maybe in the future, I mean, even now, like we have teeth whitening, right? Ortho, like all these new aligner companies are coming out. Like there's a market for people that understand that oral health is important, but it's a matter of making the right decisions on where to get your care, what type of care to get, and what to expect.
Right. No, absolutely. Unfortunately, a lot of that is, I think, driven in the wrong direction. For example, most people want to be thin before they're fit, and in dentistry, they want their teeth to be white before their gums are healthy. I mean, this is a real problem. And I'm here trying to convince people that the symbiotic health or status of your oral microbiome can contribute to your health in more ways than you would think. Like, for example, staying thin. A lot of people in our society, we have trouble keeping the weight off. And, we focus on calories and exercise, and that may be the wrong area to focus on. I would focus on your gut microbiome and your oral microbiome and how they are working synergistically together, how they overlap. And that's the key to overall health and looking better.
And there's a lot of research to support that. I even was going down the rabbit hole with just how your gut impacts like everything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And how everything is related. Gut like if you don't have like the right bacteria, then leads to like issues with anxiety, depression, things like that. It leads to issues with your teeth, which we know very much so. It leads issues with bowel movements, things like that. Like it affects everything. Sleep.
Totally. Right. And if your mental health is affected, then obviously you're not going to go out and work out and look your best and be your best and interact with people in the best way possible so that you have healthy relationships and be a good parent, for example, be a responsible citizen. So we kind of focus on the wrong thing. And, there are a lot of influencers out there that push the cosmetics and that is really not a root cause or a root reason to better yourself and be healthier. So we try and stay away from that. I mean, I'm one of those oral professionals that say that whitening your teeth is dangerous. I've got a lot of data to support it. We just did Dr. Stacy and I, one of my colleagues, we did a podcast on it. We just did a post on it. And you have to be careful. And there are other alternatives that you should try first. But most people are whitening their teeth and they've got roots that are rotting out. They've got bleeding gums. And even if they were healthy, you have to be careful. You can over whiten your teeth. It's a strong oxidizer. And it affects the oral microbiome. And a lot of these companies that are providing these services without the direct supervision of a dentist, I hate that term, supervision, by the way, the direct guidance by a dentist, they're really creating a lot of trouble and a lot of damage, and some of it's permanent. So as a profession, we really need to get after these companies. Aligners, in some cases that you can go direct to a patient. I mean, I remember coming online. I mean, Invisalign headquarters were right down the street from me in Santa Clara, and I used to work with some of the head engineers. They were patients, and I was fascinated by the whole thing, the algorithm and the clin checks. And so I was an early adopter, and actually my dental school did a lot of the early research on it. So I loved it. And I never was into ortho, but with Invisalign, it was fascinating. And so, obviously that makes for the best whitening tray, but that kind of technology is used very well in the hands of a professional. But if you start putting aligners on people that have teeth that are rotting out, that have gum disease and have not seen a dentist, oh my God. They must have a fantastic legal department.
No, I was going to say there's a lot of lawsuits. I mean, you know that.
Right.
So this kind of brings up two ideas for me. One is, as much as you have this clinical judgment that you are very in tune with, I had a patient that came in that they had a bridge that was made at an outside dentist from 28 to 32, right? Where 32 was kind of on like the retromolar pad angled, right?
Wow.
They come in, this bridge cracked in half, right? Can you please cement it back on? The last dentist I went to, they basically cemented it back on and it broke again. And I said, no, I can't cement it back on. Oh, well, can you make me a new one? I'll pay for it. And we said, no, it's going to break again. There's a reason why it broke the first time. So that patient got really angry with me. And I said, listen, I'm not going to do it for you, but I guarantee you there will be a dentist out there that does. So if a patient has their mindset on something, there will be, unfortunately, there will be a dentist that does it, which isn't the best for I guess what you're trying to accomplish, but it's, I guess what you can only do is focus on the best 95% and leave the 5% and say, okay, I'm doing the best that I can. and putting the best
Right.
information out there to get the best results.
I think in that case, of course, we run into these patients all the time. They're telling you what to do. Sometimes it's below the standard of care, what they're asking you to do. I think the key there is education. Basically, what I would do in that case, what I've done in that case, is I said, listen, we're running out of time here. I would like to set aside some time for you, maybe a half hour. I won't charge you for the appointment. I just want to sit down with you and tell you, if you go down that road, what's going to happen. I'm going to lay it all out for you. And, I don't need to do the work. If it's implants, I probably will refer it out. It's not something that I have nothing in the game other than I want you to have the best result possible. They come back and I paint all the scenarios. We put the bridge back in. You spend all that money. A 4-unit bridge is very expensive. It's a lot of cash. It's going to break. It's going to take out the wisdom tooth. Maybe the porcelain breaks off and they wear it just with the framework, and then the occlusion changes. The upper teeth will drop. 32, you said it's a lower bridge. And then all hell breaks loose. And then also the teeth that are supporting it, who cares about the wisdom tooth, right? But what about the mesial abutment, the front tooth? That's going to start wiggling. It may even work its way out. You've seen that happen, right? Where it extrudes because, one abutment is loose, the other isn't. So, and then take away all the fear. So first educate and then take away all the fears. They probably thought that original bridge was a good idea. It worked for a certain amount of time, but take away the fear of like, oh my God, if I have to go to implants, what's that going to cost? Well, we just put in a little stay plate, take out 32, remove the bridge, put a nice crown on, what was it, 20, you said 21, 20, 28, right. And then do the bone grafts right after the extractions, let it sit there for a while. And I would always tell patients, listen, that big treatment plan in the sky that you're looking at, the cost of it, that's over a period of 3 to 5 years. Right. And you can just work your way up to it a little bit at a time. Start saving now. And that way you'll get the better result. It'll last longer. It'll be better for your health.
And we'll all be.
Then you scare them. Then you scare them with little stuff like, if you get TMJ or TMD, what's going to happen then? Oh, your life's going to change. Right. You're going to have to live with chronic pain. You're going to be really upset. And so, but you can't do that in a 15-minute visit. That's the problem. Yeah.
So
usually they get it. And they're like, first, they really appreciate you doing that, especially not charging them for it. And then they get serious and they're like, and then they pick you as the clinician for most, if not all of the work. And that you've built this rapport, and then you've got a nice treatment plan that'll take you a few years to do or sooner. So it's easy to be dismissive of those patients because you're protecting yourself as a provider, which I would definitely recommend, but they need a little love. They need a lot of love. They need some compassion, understanding. Sometimes there's shame. I just met these myofunctional therapists at a breathwork retreat in Costa Rica, and they were fascinating. And I love their approach. So they do the myofunctional thing, but a lot of them have they have a history of trauma in one way or another. And then that's their approach. A lot of people that aren't breathing properly or have suffered with tongue tie and mouth breathing, for example, and then because of that have a malocclusion. Maybe their facial symmetry and aesthetics are not quite what we would prefer in our society. That's trauma. And you have to address that when you treat a patient, always, at all times. If you don't address the trauma, you cannot be a good clinician and get to the dental work you need to do, or the myofunctional work.
The root cause.
The root cause.
So I think I was looking at your website. I think you have an article for a root canal titled "The Root Cause," right?
Right. Definitely. Yeah. I think that was a response to that movie, that documentary that came out from Australia on Netflix.
I remember that. Yeah.
And it was very controversial. The endodontic societies had a reply to it. I think the ADA had a reply to it. We looked at it and noticed that there was a laptop in the latter part of the film, and it had a Panorex on it on the laptop, and that was my laptop.
No way.
They pulled it from our website, and I mean, no one knew that, but that film had so much misinformation in it. So my daughter and I, and we had one other person working with us, we pulled in a lot of data. We analyzed every part of that film that was incorrect and correct. Most of it was incorrect. and we put it up there, and within 8 hours it was pulled by Netflix. I mean, it was easy to pick that apart. The big problem there was I think he got involved in a fight. He was a young man. He was trying to protect someone. Front teeth got fractured. He had them all root canaled. And then I saw the root canal on the screen. It was high enough res where I noticed that, these root canals were done poorly, probably hairline fractures. And of course, those teeth are going to fail. I mean, those root canals are going to fail. And then the whole basis for that, one case study here, was based on the root canals in those teeth, that all root canals are bad and cause cancer. Right. And if you have a root canal on this side, you're going to get breast cancer here on the same side. And it was just so ridiculous.
It's funny because it's like we've been taught this from such a young age that correlation does not mean causation, right?
Right.
It doesn't mean that just because someone got, it's like.
Well, and people were rushing to their dentist. I was hearing about this.
We had it too.
And take this tooth out. Take all my root canal teeth out. It's like, oh my God. First get a cone beam, find out if it was well done. What's the history of the tooth? Was there trauma? Is there a fracture? How long has it been in there and not caused anything? Get a CRP test, find out if there's any inflammation in your body. I mean, there's a very measured response to that. And yes, some root canals, like wisdom teeth, we always hear about the horror stories, can really wreck your life. I mean, it can cause sepsis and even death. I mean, but that goes for any kind of surgery in the body.
So for the second realization, I only told you the first one. The second realization that I have is, and it brings us back to the pharmaceuticals. Unfortunately, there are non-dental professionals selling treatment to dentists and to the main, to the general population. Yes. So like you have these non-dentists selling these whitening trays. Oh, you get to whiten your teeth in 30 minutes, and you realize, okay, well, like the percentage of like the carbon peroxide or hydrogen peroxide is like way more, can cause way more sensitivity, but like that's in the fine print. Like as long as you get whiter teeth quicker, So I think that's a huge issue. And
well, we just had a conversation about that. There are 2 or 3 non-professional. It doesn't even matter if they're not have professional training. The information that they're putting out is literally, it's the wrong information. They're helping people damage their teeth and their oral health, and it's a little bit of a racket because one person is recommending this little LED silicone little impression thing tray, and you turn it on and then turn on the red light, and then you get red light therapy at the same time. And it's like, it's not powerful enough. There's really no proof of that. There's very little proof that a light, unless the formula is light sensitive, that it gets activated. I mean, also the strengths of the EU doesn't allow that, but it's a free for all here in the States, and they're pushing this. And so there's another website out there that is saying that nanohydroxyapatite was banned in the EU, and then there's another one. These are the 3 I guess I'm naming. There's one that's saying glycerin is bad. I'm not a big fan of glycerin. It doesn't have a place in toothpaste, but it doesn't inhibit remineralization. It's water soluble, and that information was based. I did a podcast episode on this. That information was based on one guy in the 50s. I think he had a PhD. He had no data. Just said, you know what, glycerin's bad. It coats the teeth and interferes with the biofilm. And he didn't call it biofilm back then. We didn't have that term. But this is really a problem that you brought up. And we're kind of at the point where we may have to speak out. And I'm just trying to figure out what's the best way of doing that and being professional. So we're trying to figure that out.
You're in a good spot to be able to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
For the rest of us.
Right.
Anyway, so I want to end this podcast with, I ask this question to almost everyone I interview.
I should have done my research.
So what's your ultimate goal and your end goal? Because unfortunately, like as you're kind of going through this, like you're always trying to create, write this and that. So what do you see for yourself, as you progress through your retirement through Askthedentist?
Is this a professional goal, a personal goal, or is it kind of all the above? Or right? Wow. Well, first thing that pops into my mind, I'll just speak off the cuff here, is I'd love to see fluoride taken out of the water or drinking water. That's been a goal of mine probably since I was 22, 23. before dental school. And that's a whole different conversation. I would love to see functional dentistry take hold. I don't want to see dentistry go the way that medicine did 30, 40 years ago. Corporate, HMO, PPO, hospital organizations, even nonprofit, which is kind of a racket in itself. And I realize that there will always be that part of it in dentistry. But dentistry, when I became a dentist, 70, 80% was sole proprietor, one provider doing what they wanted to do. Unfortunately, that's not possible now because of rising costs and other paradigm shifts and influences, external influences. So, but I think if, like functional medicine, I think if patients have an option, that would be very exciting to me. And I think we're on our way to accomplishing that. I would love for this website to continue. And, we're definitely, I'm always thinking of legacy planning in that regard, because obviously I won't be around, for the next 100 years. So I kind of think about that a little bit. Obviously, my daughter will carry it on. She's younger than I am. I think I generally just want people to have a better, higher regard for a well-trained dentist. People would always tell me, I hate dentistry. I like you, Dr. Burhenne, but I hate dentistry. I would rather have it be the other way around, personally. I love dentistry. I'm not sure about you, but I love the profession. I would want them to really understand that there's this connection between oral health and systemic health. What happens in the mouth interacts with what happens in the body. There's that connection. I would want everyone to really be up on that. And because of that, I think people would seek out dental care. I really feel bad for patients that are losing their teeth, full mouth extractions at age 40 and 50. Even in the Silicon Valley, I saw that. I literally would tear up with them. They'd be tearing up more than I did, but that was difficult. I knew the implications of that. They didn't. It was a stigma, of course, and we're getting better at it. Certainly in certain parts of the country, certain parts of the world, we're not. But it would be nice if we all have the opportunity to be able to grow old and have all of our teeth and not need dentures or, bridges, implants, not worry about root canals, whether root canal is a good thing or not. And really that partly is due to the profession misinforming everyone. Brushing and flossing, that doesn't solve anything. That may help you get less dental work, but we need to work on the root causes. That's diet, dry mouth, facial development due to our external environment. These tongue ties and pollution and allergies that make us, mouth breathers, all of that. I just want all of that to power up and empower people to not live with that shame of not having their teeth. It's difficult not to have your teeth and a nice smile. That is, you can hide other medical conditions. You can't hide poor oral health. And I think that it would be nice if we could all have the opportunity to be able to smile and be happy.
Yeah, no, couldn't have said it better myself. Well, I think that we could have gone for another hour, but thank you so much for hopping on. I really appreciate it. I think that with what you're doing in just the dental profession, hopefully being an advocate for us all, it will lead to a better road for us in the future. And then that legacy could be left. But thank you again for coming on.
Well, thank you. And I love dentistry. And if you're a dentist, it's even better now with the oral microbiome testing, the ability to quantify the oral microbiome and what is the root cause of oral disease. I never had that as a young dentist. So it's a very exciting time. Facial development, early intervention, with ortho and instead of late intervention. It's an exciting time to be a dentist. So I definitely recommend looking towards the functional approach. There's lots of CE now coming out, and I loved your questions. I usually get asked about the under the hood kind of stuff, dental stuff. So it allowed me to help, in my mind or verbalize my daughters and my mission, our purpose.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, ask the dentist. All right.
There we go.